But don't put them on that side. Is that right? I'm I particularly want to welcome the guests who have come halfway around the world to be with us tonight, and then of course the Boston contingent too, but especially those that have traveled so far. My name's Tom Patterson. Many of you in the room know me, but you know me as a professor at the Kennedy School. Tonight I'm wearing a different hat. This is my unpaid hat, and this is I'm the head. They say president, but that bothers me a little bit. I don't quite feel like a president, but I'm the president of Tran and Tong Academy, which is a nonprofit that we started. I want to tell you just a little bit about what it is and why it brings us here tonight. Each semester at the Shorenstein Center, we have visiting fellows, and in many ways they're the life of the center. They bring new ideas in. We learn a lot from them. Hopefully they learn something from us. And I'm thankful that the 4 visiting Shorenstein Center fellows from this semester are here tonight. Tara McKelvey. Tara, where are you? From Newsweek and journalist with Newsweek and the Daily Beast. If you're from abroad and you don't know what the Daily Beast is, it's not our nickname for the Romney campaign. It's a really terrific online newspaper. Josh Bartlow is here. I saw Josh earlier. Foreign correspondent from the Washington Post, came to the center almost straight back from 3 years in Afghanistan, where he was the post bureau chief in Kabul. Matt Nisbet, one of the best young scholars in communication from American University, is here somewhere. Matt. And then Kathleen Reen, who's the vice president from Internews. And Kathleen was an afternoon speaker at our conference. Other speakers were Mike Dukakis, Roland Schatz from Media Tenor, Steve Walt, a colleague of mine at the Kennedy School, and Twan, my friend Twan. Where are you, Twan? So 5 years ago at the Shorenstein Center, I was acting director. And we had a really unusual group of fellows that semester. They were very close personally, and I became quite close with that group as well. And at the end of the semester, 4 of us decided that we would establish a nonprofit and that it would have the mission of bringing journalism training to individuals from developing countries so that they would have more sensitivity to the values of journalism. And the other 3 were Jeff Cohen, who had been Bill Clinton's director of The Voice of America, and Tom Fiedler, who had been editor at the Miami Herald. Tom is now the dean of the Communications School at Boston University. Tom would be with us tonight, except tonight BU is launching its first $1 billion fundraising campaign. There's a new wing of the Communications School that's riding on Tom's presence at the dinner tonight, so Tom's not here. And then Mr. Tran as well, the 4 of us. And the following year, we brought a small group of Vietnamese journalists here for a week. They divided their time almost equally between the journalism program at Boston University and the Shorenstein Center. We were very fortunate at that time to have some people in the center who could help them really think hard about reporting, editing. Marilee Schwartz from the Washington Post was there at the time. One of the young journalists who was here for that 1-week intensive kind of introduction to American journalism is here tonight, Dr. Tran. So we did that first venture, and then things just kind of fell by the wayside. Too much to do, and frankly too little money to do these sorts of things. I even forgot to, I'm trying to remember, is it $35 or $15? Some of the rest of you who do NGOs in the room will know I forgot to do the Secretary of State's filing fee that you have to do every year. So it just kind of sat there. And then a little over 3 years ago, Tong was visiting Boston. And Twan came to our place. Lori Conway, my wife, is here at the far end. And we hosted for dinner Twan and Charles Ansbacher, who was the conductor for the Boston Landmarks Orchestra. Many of you knew Charles. And during the course of the evening, Twan suggested to Charles that he come to Hanoi to direct the Vietnam National Symphony Orchestra. And in April of 2010, Charles did so, the first American conductor to have that honor. The concert's timing and its name were no coincidence. April 2010 was the 35th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. And traditionally, the anniversary was a time to celebrate victory in Vietnam. The concert, however, was titled the Reconciliation Concert. It was less about winners and losers than about how you bring opposing sides together, even long after a conflict. And the concert is now an annual event. Last summer and this, it was held at the Esplanade in Boston with the Boston Landmark Orchestra. And you'll see images from those concerts and also from Charles's concert in Hanoi later this evening. And the Hanoi concert particularly convinced us that we needed to make reconciliation a part of our mission. And we've created an ambitious website. It's ambitious up here so far, not so ambitious in fact, but we're building it out and we'll continue to build it out. It'll be a place where people can come, talk about this issue, share ideas, share solutions, share experiences, with the idea that reconciliation is a long process. It requires awareness of what's at issue and how you navigate those very difficult times. But we also wanted to do something to recognize leaders who have made major contributions in the realm of reconciliation. And so we decided to create an annual international prize, the Tran and Tong Reconciliation Prize. This year's recipients are Myanmar's President, U Thant Sen, and Myanmar's opposition leader, Daw Aung San Suu Kyi. And we'll talk more about the two of them later. But what I want to do right now is to recognize a few special guests that we have in the room. U Thant Nguyen, somewhere you're up, I think at the, there he is. He's the former Deputy Foreign Minister of Myanmar, was posted diplomatically in Czechoslovakia, Switzerland, when the flawed election happened in 1990 in Burma, Myanmar. He spoke out about it, which made him not quite the kind of diplomat that Myanmar wanted to have at the time. After 2 weeks of kind of re-indoctrination, and he didn't quite get it, then gradually moved toward separation from the Foreign Service, and it's been in private business ever since. But we're absolutely delighted that you came all this way to be here tonight. Also at the head table is Nhan, who's chairman and CEO of SSI. It's one of the most successful businesses in Vietnam, and he's one of the top business leaders, very innovative, and he's helped underwrite this event this evening. Thank you very much. The third person is from Africa, from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Americans aspire to their 15 seconds of fame. This individual got 60 minutes of fame. You know, Armand, our foundation is going to have people around the world who are going to serve as ambassadors for the kind of message that we want to get out. And Armand has agreed to be our ambassador in Africa. Eventually we'll have, hopefully, ambassadors in every country in Africa and every country around the world. And I'm happy to say tonight that except for Antarctica, every continent is represented in the room. So, Armand. And then if you're looking at your program, there's a fourth name. This individual is not here. Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a Buddhist monk, ranks below the Dalai Lama, but ranks above nearly all other Buddhist monks in that hierarchy. Some of you will recall the monks, there were more than 30 in all, that burned themselves to death in Vietnam in protest of the American war in Vietnam. He was their teacher, he was their inspiration, he was exiled. He's now 86, he's living in France in a monastery. He's agreed to join our advisory board, and in the packet you will find a letter from the Zen master. And now I'd like to introduce Ann McDaniel, Senior Vice President of the Washington Post. She's a member of our advisory board. She's going to say a few words, and then she's going to head for the airport to go back to Washington. Ann.
I'm humbled to be here and was fascinated, for those of you who missed the conference this afternoon, the conversations about reconciliation, certainly about the media's role in reconciliation and what we can do, or how it is we portray stories in the media that actually not only create conflict, but further conflict. And I sat there during this feeling a fair amount of conflict myself. as I do. My history is as a journalist for 25 years. About 12 years ago, I moved from the journalism side of the Washington Post company. I was running Newsweek at the time. I'm sorry, that's not true. I was the #2 editor at Newsweek at the time, and moved over to the business side of the Washington Post company to work with our owner, Don Graham, not only on trying to figure out how to create opportunities and environments for people to do good work throughout our company, but also to think about the big problems we face in the media as the business model changes and how we could move forward. We feel fairly beaten down in the American media when we think about our future. It's one that is not as easy and bright as it was a decade ago when advertisers used particularly print and conventional broadcast to news and other broadcast forms to get the word out, to sell their products. And with the dramatic increase in opportunities through both cable and then internet of people throughout the world to contribute to the news, and also the movement in our country to go away from a kind of mass gathering of information or mass digestion of information to an opportunity to pick just what it is that you'd like to read, just what it is you're interested in. As I try to think about what role we play and where we could contribute to reconciliation in the world at large, it seems to me it's still focused on the mission that we as American journalists, somewhat different than those in other parts of the world, not all different from all, but different from many, have. We make mistakes all the time. We're flawed as people are in so many of your professions too. But our goal, particularly at the large media companies like the Washington Post Company or the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, we pride ourselves in getting things right and trying to tell the story of what is going on in this country and what is going on throughout the world. It's a challenging, difficult profession. It is hard to talk to people for an hour, a day, a week, a month, and capture enough about their story to convey it to all of you and to readers and users in ways that will be informative and beneficial and interesting to you. But it is a mission that we believe is a noble one, and a mission that we believe leads to the kind of reconciliation, the kind of understanding of the world that is necessary for us all to have opportunities to work not only within this country, but work across the globe. So, not as a representative of the Washington Post Company, but as an individual, I think about what Americans' future is, and how will information be available to Americans and then to people outside this country who are dependent, who have relied on extraordinary programming like 60 Minutes, fine journalists like those in this room tonight doing the Shorenstein Center. If we took every wealthy person in the United States and could convince them to give $1 million, you could still see how short a time, say we wanted to fund 1,000 journalists to do investigations throughout the world. Investigative journalism is a slow, difficult, and tedious process. So as we think about how we can make this world a more peaceful one, a better one, it's incumbent on those of us in the media to not be quite as addicted to conflict as we sometimes are. We sort of like two things. We like conflict and underdogs. Those are what make interesting stories. And of course, a little celebrity juice along the side works pretty nicely too. But we have to find ways to make sure we are providing balanced and accurate, not in any, we can't depend on any one story or any one publication, but the mass of the media has to be providing to you and to people throughout the world independent, verifiable, compelling, interesting journalism. But what that will take from you and from people throughout this country and people throughout this world is investment. And I am not smart enough yet to figure out where that investment will come from and how it will do. I believe that the need and the desire, I believe all of you who are reading and digesting compelling, accurate, very detailed investigative reporting today will have access to the same quality information a decade from now. But it won't look like it does today. It will probably come more on your laptop or your iPad or another mobile device than it does in print. And it's going to cost you more to get it. But it's not only, certainly media companies are businesses. We have shareholders, they want a return on their investment. Ownership wants to make a profit. But there is another more noble and more important goal, and that is to be able to provide accurate, compelling, interesting, verifiable journalism, so that it's not just rooms like this where people have an opportunity to talk to each other and learn about the world around them, but it is the places, people in much less affluent communities, people in much less populated places, people who just don't have the privilege of being invited to the Kennedy School, can get the same level of information, think about it, digest it, and do their part to make the world a better place. So as I said, I'm humbled. I'm amazed by the incredible work that people in this room have done and continue to do. Tran, who was helpful with, as Tom said, in working on this reconciliation prize, is a one-man ambassador. He has been working in Vietnam, in the media, trying to change and make sure that as much truth as the media could possibly tell there, as much information was getting out to the Vietnamese people. And now, having come to the United States, he's trying to make sure that all of us keep thinking about how we contribute to making that information available to people all throughout the world. So I thank you very much for having me. I hope it is a delightful evening and a wonderful dinner, an inspiring opportunity for you, and an opportunity where you'll go away thinking about what is the concert, as Twan put together, what is the other opportunity that we all have to create reconciliation and peace throughout the world. So thank you so much.
We do have some breaks, actually, so you can talk to each other. So it's okay, go ahead. With your main dinner dish, but I thought I would start talking and leading into the award. When I was a young man, or a younger man, actually it's almost 50 years ago now, I was on a plane headed halfway around the world. In my bag, and I think I may be wrong, but I think the book was Bernard Fall's The Two Vietnams, and it told the story of how Kublai Khan had invaded Vietnam after conquering China, becoming the first non-Chinese to take over China, and invaded Vietnam and had lost. And then 2 years later regrouped, put his best general in charge of the army. This time also took cavalry and put together one of the largest naval armadas that the Far East had ever seen, and went after Vietnam a second time. And Vietnam beat Kublai Khan for the second time. Now, if you're a young Army officer headed into war in Vietnam, that's not the kind of reading that's very heartening. And I thought, boy, this is going to be a tough war, and it was. And then 2 years ago, or roughly 2 years ago, my wife Lori and I were in Vietnam. We spent an evening at Ho Lan Bay, spent it on the water at Ho Lan Bay, and on the way back, we stopped at a pagoda, and we went in, drove in, and as we read, I realized that this was the same king who had ruled Vietnam during those two attempts on the part of Kublai Khan to conquer Vietnam. And then I learned some more about this king. After that, the last triumph, not too long thereafter, he gave up his throne and went to live on a mountaintop in a life of contemplation and self-sacrifice and simplicity. That he also, when the war ended, had allowed the Mongol warriors to go back rather than killing them, as was often the case in these kinds of wars. And then there were some Vietnamese who basically had aided Kublai Khan. And his punishment for them was not killing, but they had to change their last name so everyone would know who they were thereafter. But reaching out, this whole idea of reconciliation, compassion, simplicity, the end of the war, he opened up the treasury so that they could feed the poor. And that king was Tran. And we have someone here tonight who is going to be able to tell you in greater detail about him. It's Layman That. We're very honored to have him. Professor That is Vice President of the Buddhist University in Ho Chi Minh City. He's a foremost scholar of Buddhism and Vietnam history. Also, he's from Quang Tri province, and there's a couple of veterans in the room, in addition to myself. Quang Tri province was where the Battle of Khe Sanh took place. One of the bloodiest battles of the Vietnam War, 3,000 casualties on the American side, an unknown number, much greater on the Vietnamese side. There was a Special Forces camp. I was in Special Forces. One of my colleagues, Doug Coulter, who I met in Vietnam, was also in Special Forces. The Special Forces camp, a few kilometers from Khe Sanh, Long Bay, got overrun. And it was one of the toughest battles of the Vietnam War. Well, Professor That is from Quang Tri, and what he would like to do, and what Tran Anh Tong Academy is going to work with him on, is creating a memorial and a museum at Khe Sanh that will recognize not simply the Vietnamese sacrifices of the war, but will be an opportunity and a place where the shared sacrifices of the American soldiers and the Vietnamese soldiers can be recognized. And he's now going to provide us some additional wisdom and words so that we know more about the person after whom this award is named. Professor Tran has been a monk since his youth, so please.
Thank you, Professor Patterson. Actually, I suppose talk about King Nhan Tong, but he only have a very good summary of this king work. And the thing I would like to add is actually at this time, in the 13th century, as you know, Vietnam at that time is, that means north and south. The Tang is about 400 kilometers. That means up to 17 parallel now. And from Hanoi down to about 17 parallel. So it's quite a small country. And then when as you know, the Mongolian army come into Vietnam, they only have many battles over the Asia and part of the Eastern Europe. So the Vietnamese at that time is in a very difficult situation. And Nhan Tong himself, he pulled the resources of his own people and stood up in the fight against the Mongolian army at that time. So the way that he mobilized the resource of his country in facing a very large and powerful army as the Mongolian. So that showed that he had the trust of his people, that his people stand around him under his command, and through that solidarity that the Vietnamese at that time could successfully beat back the Mongolian army. That is one of the lessons for any nation, big or small. In any nation, I mean, in Europe, for example, we have the Roman Empire, where many big country, but then it collapsed. I mean, at that time, the people couldn't stay together. So the subject of our conference today about reconciliation. Reconciliation not only because we are in conflict, but also in our work together and bring people together for doing something. Actually, when we talk about reconciliation, usually we suppose that there's some conflict of interest some way. And because of that now, two factions, two sides, fighting each other under certain form. And then finally they have to have some way to come together. Otherwise we could not go on fighting. And I think in Buddhism, and Tran Tong himself, he is a Buddhist, we have the saying that we should bring love, compassion to destroy, to sweep away the hatred. We couldn't use the hatred to destroy hatred. So I think the Nhan Tong, he's an embodiment of that spirit, of that ideal of Buddhism. In a Buddhist culture, the appeal for compassion, for respecting each other is very important. The Tran Nhan Tong, I mean, we have a Tran Nhan Tong prize here. I think it's appropriate. Actually, we Vietnamese are very honored today and tonight to have a Vietnamese that we honor him, to name a prize after his name. So Professor Patterson told me that to say in detail, to talk something about Tran Nhan Tong, but then I think that probably you all, this audience, that you all know a little bit about Tran Nhan Tong through his introduction. So now I have my own some small remark like that, and thank you very much for your attention.
So we have a short video, hopefully one that works this time. And you can see some images, and we cut Armand off a bit last time. He only saw half of that video. You'll see him again. You'll see Charles. Many of you knew Charles, who headed the Boston Landmarks Orchestra. And then you can see some mountaintop, and that's where the pagoda was, where he went after resigning as the king and going for a life of contemplation. As an annual prize, with an award committee receiving international nominations, it's structured so that it has to have at least 2 or more recipients, recognizing that it takes movement on both sides, or 2 sides of a conflict, to bring about reconciliation. And this year's award recipients, and one of our representatives met with both of them about 3 weeks ago in Myanmar, and they've willingly and gladly and enthusiastically accepted the award. They will be individually presented the award next week. One will be here in Cambridge. The other we will meet in New York. But the recipients this year are Myanmar's President U Thant Sen and Myanmar's opposition leader Daw Aung San Suu Kyi. Burma had one of the world's longest consecutive military dictatorships. In 2011, the general selected General Thein Sein to be the next president. Many thought he was chosen because he was not corrupt, and therefore he would not be able to amass any power. In fact, he was not a powerful figure in Myanmar. He was more like a Medvedev than a Putin. But in his inaugural speech, he surprised almost everyone, from the generals on down. He called for workers' rights, an end to corruption. And most shockingly, he said of Myanmar's ethnic groups that they'd been unfairly subjected to a host of untold miseries. Things have moved quickly since then: the legalization of opposition parties, the holding of free elections, hundreds of political prisoners have been freed. Only 3 weeks ago, press censorship in Myanmar was lifted. And of course, late last year, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton visited there, the first time in 50 years that high a ranking American official has been in Myanmar. Myanmar still has a long way to go, but the reconstruction process has started both within and outside, and President U Thein Sein has been instrumental, central even, to this development. Now Aung San Suu Kyi heads Myanmar's opposition party, the National League for Democracy. In the 1990 general election, the NLD won about 60% of the vote, 80% of the seats, even before the votes were counted, and knowing they would lose, the generals placed her under house arrest. And for the next 2 decades, she was under house arrest 3/4 of the time, forbidden by the government even to go to Oslo to collect and accept the Nobel Peace Prize in 1991. When Thein Sein became president in 2011, she and he exchanged secret messages, hoping that maybe they could meet some agreement and change the situation in Myanmar. They met finally, and she said after the meeting, "I have a feeling I can work with him." His confidence in him grew, and her confidence in him also grew, and in 2011, in a parliamentary election, she ran and won one of the seats. Her party won 43 of the 45 contested seats in an election that most international observers thought was surprisingly, remarkably free and fair. And in June, more than 2 decades after she received the award, she was in Oslo to deliver her Nobel acceptance speech. Aung San Suu Kyi, more than anyone, has worked tirelessly and unselfishly to bring reconciliation to Myanmar. I want to call upon Janet Gyatso, professor in the Divinity School, to offer some remarks.
Good evening, everyone. It is really an honor for me to participate tonight in the awarding of the Tran Tong Reconciliation Prize, and I'm very grateful for the invitation from Mr. Nguyen Antoine for me to speak. It's a great privilege to be able to add my voice to the celebration in which we are participating here tonight, a celebration of the outstanding rapprochement and new spirit of cooperation and compromise that over the last few months the world has watched unfold in amazement and delight between the government of Myanmar and the National League for Democracy. While my brief remarks are going to focus on the critical role of Aung San Suu Kyi in this phenomenal turn of events in Myanmar, it is by no means to disregard the courage and vision for the future of Myanmar also displayed by President U Thein Sein and all that he has begun to do in the way of political and social reforms, the relaxing of media laws, as you just heard, the legalization of protests, the releasing of hundreds of political prisoners and allowing fair elections to go forward, the very elections that have finally won for Aung San Suu Kyi and other members of her party a rightful place in the government of Myanmar. I actually had the privilege of getting to know Aung San Suu Kyi many years ago when her husband, the Tibetologist Michael Aris, participated in a multi-university project to recover old Buddhist manuscripts in Nepal, in which I, at the time a graduate student working on Tibetan Buddhism, I also took part. Suu Kyi was also there with their newborn son, Alexander. This was in 1973. more than a decade before Suu Kyi's momentous destiny had begun to unfold. In the month when we all were living together in a house in Kathmandu while waiting for our trekking permits, I remember being struck most of all by Suu Kyi's regal bearing and sense of herself, even while carrying out the most mundane tasks of being a mother and wife in which she was entirely immersed at the time. But what is most arresting to me now, as I review these memories, is not those glimmerings, discernible even then, of her destiny as a great leader, but rather what she had to sacrifice in order to fulfill that destiny. What captures my attention now is the memory of the love of her family, especially of her husband, my colleague Michael, which I also observed then, and over the years that I continue to see Michael in scholarly venues, along with that of the two sons that she went on to raise. Most great humanitarian acts involve significant personal sacrifice, but in Aung San Suu Kyi's case, the choice between her loved ones and her duty to the people of Myanmar was exceptionally stark and bifurcated. There was no way to have them both, not even just a little bit. It was entirely, it had to be one or the other. In asking me to offer a few remarks today, Mr. Nguyen requested that I speak to the role of Buddhism in the reconciliation between Aung San Suu Kyi and the rulers of Myanmar. But in the course of our discussion, I pointed out to him that I have reservations in identifying Buddhism as such, as the reason for the hopeful developments unfolding there today. On the one hand, the resilient steadfastness of purpose and commitment to nonviolence that has made for the success of Aung San Suu Kyi's cause are common to many religions. And indeed, the very notion of nonviolent struggle was articulated in terms of Hindu values, of course, by Gandhi, and it was equally compelling and empowering in the Christian idioms of Dr. Martin Luther King. And on the other hand, it's hardly the case that all Buddhist leaders today or in the past are paragons of virtue and integrity. Aung San Suu Kyi herself has championed the work of Burmese literary figures like Tang Pe Min, a devout Buddhist whose novel Modern Monk castigates the many corrupt Burmese Buddhist monks and Sangha leaders. Indeed, Aung San Suu Kyi insists on a distinction between the Buddhist identity to which most Burmese claim inheritance, albeit superficially, and an intentional and deeply committed adaptation of Buddhist practices and concepts as a way to focus and channel the kind of resolve and moral commitment necessary for beneficial action on behalf of one's people. So Buddhism does not stand in a privileged position over against other religious and moral traditions to offer the world resources for social justice or democracy, even if it does have distinctive contributions to make. And again, these resources need to be mobilized intentionally and in light of contemporary conditions, and in light of contemporary media, and in light of shifting cultural significances of Buddhist institutions and symbols. 20th century Buddhist monks, in fact, then have drawn strategically on their moral authority as celibate ascetics to stage striking political protests in Vietnam, more recently in Tibet, and of course the Buddhist monastic community in Burma has been outstanding in leading its citizens in massive demonstrations in the so-called Saffron Revolution of 2007, highlighting both the traditional Buddhist value of nonviolence and the moral prestige of the monastic. And Aung San Suu Kyi herself has drawn judiciously and again intentionally and self-consciously on old Buddhist notions of kingship to ground the ideology of the movement in Myanmar for democracy and justice. She writes of a Buddhist view of history that values above all the ruler who can restore peace and moral order by virtue of the consent of the people. She also speaks at length of the category of the 10 duties of kings, translating in the process such virtues as liberality, integrity, kindness, austerity, non-anger, non-violence, and non-opposition to the will of the people, translating them into terms directly relevant to the situation in Myanmar today. She acknowledges that in Buddhist story traditions, the complete self-sacrifice of the hermit in service of freeing others from suffering is more relevant to high religious goals rather than what could plausibly describe the work of the modern public servant. He's using language from old Buddhist texts that point to higher principles that constitute duties transcending individual desire and biases, and indeed particular cultures or religions. In this, she is identifying traditional Buddhist values that stand as universal principles with the modern conceptions underlying the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, to which Aung San Suu Kyi has made very effective reference. For Aung San Suu Kyi personally, commitment to such universal principles has meant an ineluctable sense of duty to her people that had to trump her role as a mother and wife, or at least made her into a very distant, if exemplary, mother and wife. It's a duty she discerned long ago on the, occasion of her marriage, and to which both husband and wife agreed as a foundational condition for their own commitment to each other. Michael Aris was visiting professor in Harvard's Department of Sanskrit and Indian Studies in 1991 when he put together the collection of Aung San Suu Kyi's writings published under the title Freedom from Fear. He writes of her catapult into the Burmese political spotlight in the introduction to the volume. The promise to support her decision, he writes, which I had given in advance so many years ago, now had to be fulfilled. I had imagined that if a day of reckoning were to come, it would happen later in life, when our children were grown up. But fate and history never seemed to work in orderly fashion. All that Sue had to draw on were her finely cultivated sense of commitment and her powers of reason. But she was also blessed and burdened with her unique status as the daughter of a national hero. Well, those same powers, blessings, and burdens continue to nurture this extraordinarily brave woman as she held on to her principles for 23 years, repeatedly refusing release from house arrest if it meant that she had to leave the country and thereby be prevented from serving her people's quest for democracy, even if it did mean that she could be reunited with her family. Aung San Suu Kyi became known in Myanmar as the female bodhisattva, a special term for a Buddhist saint who devotes all efforts for the welfare of others, but it's a term rarely applied to women. Her dedication and integrity meant that when the retired prime minister and member of the military junta ruling Myanmar was elected as a civilian to the office of president of the country, a man who, it turns out, has the vision to recognize a different path for Myanmar, a path in which civil liberties would earn the country entree into the world community and global efforts towards progress and development. It turned out he had the perfect partner. Both share, it turns out, deeply pragmatic convictions. Both are resolved to do what has to be done for change to happen, and especially to continence negotiation and compromise. And there can also be no doubt that Aung San Suu Kyi is the perfect negotiation partner for President U Thein Sein because of her potent the potent symbol that she has become in the Burmese imagination. So we can only hope and offer our hope that as Daw Aung San Suu Kyi and her party move forward in collaboration with the President's new government, they will find ways to expand civil liberties, democracy, and ethnic tolerance and cooperation in Myanmar. As Myanmar takes its place on the world stage, it has an extraordinary opportunity to provide leadership as an Asian model of compromise and social reconciliation in our troubled times, at a moment when so many other countries and leaders are having such a hard time to find their way to peace, tolerance, and a flourishing society. Thank you.
They're going to clear the tables. You'll get the dessert at your place, and once that's there, I will introduce our dinner speaker, Michael Kretka.
Hi everyone. everybody. How are you today? Tonight? How about tonight? Wonderful night, right? I'm so surprised. And I'm so happy and so proud to be here today. And chào tất cả mọi người và xin chào tất cả quý vị. Và ngày hôm nay Liễu Phương Anh xin phép được nhờ anh Phong giới thiệu để cho nó nói về Liễu Phương Anh muốn giới thiệu tới tất cả quý vị một làn điệu dân ca của Việt Nam.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is quite unexpected for me that I didn't prepare any song, so I would really have to sing a cappella without the accompaniment. So it's going to be a traditional tune from Vietnam that I hope that can deliver you some spirit of Vietnam, and I'm very proud to be here, and I would like to share my passion to all of you tonight.
Sau đây ca khúc Liễu Phương Anh sẽ gửi tới quý vị một làn điệu dân ca khúc được gọi là Bèo dạt mây trôi.
The name of the song, I'm not quite sure how to translate it into English, but it's a traditional song talking about the love story of the clown and then the water, representing the male and the female lovers in the Vietnamese tradition that normally separated by their parents, but they still find a way to be together. And then the clown normally reflects on the water, and then the water looks really beautiful with the clown reflected on it. So basically, that's the content of the song. So representing Miss Liễu Phương Anh.
Xin cho Liễu Phương Anh một tràng pháo tay được không ạ? Và xin cảm ơn rất là quý vị. Tại vì run quá. Bèo dạt mây trôi chốn xa xôi, anh ơi em vẫn đợi bèo dạt mây trôi, chim ca tăng tính tình cá lội, ngậm một tiếng trống, hai tin đợi, ba bốn tin chờ, sao chẳng thấy đâu. Người đi xa có nhớ là nhớ ai ngồi trong cánh chim trời, sao chẳng thấy đâu. Xin cảm ơn các bạn. Thank you so much.
So I just made Mike Greco's job tougher. Got to follow up on that one, Mike. So our dinner speaker is Mike Greco, past president of the American Bar Association. He was also president of the New England Bar Association, the Massachusetts Bar Association, plus 40 years of law practice. That's a lot of time at the bar, Mike. That was a small joke, I think. And later this year, Mike's going to be teaching international law as a visiting faculty member at Peking University in China. And for the past 3 years, Mike has chaired the ABA Center for Human Rights and now also chairs its advisory board. There are many things that I admire about Mike's career, but I particularly like what he's done to expand the vision of the ABA, to move it away from a narrow preoccupation with law to take on other issues, including issues of diversity within the profession, speaking out in terms of policies like America's war on terrorism and how we wage that war. When Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, Mike arranged, got the ABA behind and got lawyers to give free time to thousands upon thousands of the victims of Hurricane Katrina to help them with the legal issues that are connected to it. And in his new position, Mike has been very active in moving the ABA into the international arena to give it an important voice in that arena and to bring a certain set of values and perspectives to thinking about not only American law, but the international law. And I'm very grateful that Mike has chosen to be here tonight. Mike.
Good evening, everyone. I know it's getting late in the evening, and I hope you will have the energy to listen to what I would like to share with you on the subjects that we've already heard some words about. But before I start, when Professor Patterson called me to invite me to speak tonight, I quickly accepted for many reasons. But it reminded me of the occasion when someone else was invited to speak and the man accepted. And then the inviter said to the man, by the way, you will only have 5 minutes to speak. And the man said, well, how can I possibly tell everything I know on the subject in 5 minutes? And the answer was, speak slowly. Well, let me get to my remarks. I'm very, very honored to be with you this evening and to be part of the inaugural presentation of the Tran Tong Reconciliation Prize. We know that the two recipients are highly deserving individuals. One, a human rights champion, and the other, a president, both of whom seek to reconcile Burma's long history of oppression with a just rule of law for the people of Burma. As we have heard, Tran Nhan Tong was a majestic leader and a victor. But at the height of his power, he abdicated his throne. He gave up power to pursue his vision of a country dedicated to reconciliation and peace. His example calls to mind George Washington, who also gave up power in service for a higher vision. When a vanquished King George III of England asked the American painter Benjamin West what Washington would do after winning democracy and freedom and independence, West replied, "They say he will return to his farm. If he does that," said the King of England, "he will be the greatest man in the world." Washington did, and to many he was. In Burma and throughout the world, Aung San Suu Kyi has earned a similar greatness as a duly elected but denied president who has lived her commitment to human rights through steadfast and personal sacrifice. In President Thein Sein, she now has a government partner in securing the rights and human dignity of their fellow citizens. As they know better than anyone, Burma is a country whose future depends on meaningful societal reconciliation. Not only to overcome the decades of abusive military rule, but to ensure that all the people of Burma, whatever their ethnicities, are treated as equal. In remarks 3 days ago at the U.S. Institute of Peace in Washington, D.C., Aung San Suu Kyi said this: "There are still hundreds of political prisoners in Burma today. They will all have to be freed. If you talk about genuine democratization, there should not be a single political prisoner in Burma. There should be no prisoners of conscience, because in a genuine democracy, people should be able to act in accordance with their conscience so long as they're not infringing on the rights of others." She also said, "Human rights and the rule of law, these cannot be ignored in Burma." And that, I think, she said, has to be accepted by all the responsible parties. To ignore either human rights or the rule of law, or to ignore human rights and pretend that rule of law is a different matter, won't work. Nor will it work the other way around, she said. You cannot say that we must have the rule of law, but human rights is something we will think about later. These two have to go together, she said. Reconciliation. Let me talk a little bit about reconciliation. Reconciliation is a complex, multifaceted, nuanced subject, linked both to the healing of victims and the telling of truths about international crimes, which together form the basis of a society moving beyond upheaval and ruptures. It has been claimed that providing a sense of justice through prosecutions for international crimes can facilitate societal reconciliation and provide the preconditions for a durable peace. This notion is often expressed in the aphorism, "No peace without justice." Evidence from Latin America, where policies of amnesty were rife in the 1970s, but where prosecutions have continuously been demanded and recently have begun to occur, provides some support for that position. The UN Security Council provided significant support for the interconnection of peace and justice when it determined in the situations in the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda that prosecutions would assist in reconciliation and a return to peace in those areas. Perhaps the strongest statement of support for the link between criminal justice and peace in the former Yugoslavia came in the decision of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, the ICTY, in the Plavšić case. Biljana Plavšić was a co-president of the Republika Srpska during 1992. She surrendered to the ICTY and pleaded guilty to crimes against humanity, expressing her remorse and stating that in doing so she wished to, quote, offer some consolation to the innocent victims, Muslim, Croat, and Serb, of the war. In sentencing her to 11 years imprisonment, the tribunal noted, quote, acknowledgement and full disclosure of serious crimes are very important when establishing the truth in relation to such crimes. This, together with acceptance of responsibility for the committed wrongs, will promote reconciliation. Those who doubt that international criminal law promotes peace and reconciliation believe that requiring prosecutions will cause more bloodshed, with parties to conflicts fighting to the end. On the other hand, there is anecdotal evidence that the International Criminal Court, indictments and prosecutions since the court began operations in 2002, have had a deterrent effect in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It is still too early to say whether the optimists or the pessimists are correct. It is worth noting that 121 states parties to the Rome Statute have affirmed that the commission of international crimes threatens the, quote, peace, security, and well-being of the world. It is also important to note that the UN Security Council has the authority directly to affect the ambivalent relationship between international criminal justice and peace by using its power to restore and maintain international peace and security under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, by deciding not only to refer a situation to the International Criminal Court, but also to defer an ICC prosecution if circumstances warrant. Closely related to the dichotomy and interplay of international criminal justice and peace and reconciliation are the subjects of amnesty and truth commissions. Those who speak in favor of granting amnesties to advance reconciliation claim that amnesties are necessary to bring an end to conflicts, and that to insist on anything more is to condemn others to death or serious human rights violations as combatants, and others will refuse to relinquish their weapons of power without a promise of amnesty. Others see the grant of amnesties as giving in to blackmail, fostering a culture of impunity that denies retribution to criminals and denies justice to untold thousands of massacred and suffering human beings, and encouraging the commission of future crimes. Granting amnesties, therefore, is considered by its opponents to undermine the deterrent function of international criminal law and to represent an ugly political compromise. Sometimes this compromise is also seen as one between powerful elites who bargain away the rights of victims with little regard for their human dignity. Conversely, its proponents, especially the perpetrators of crime, urge that amnesties promote reconciliation between previously antagonistic parties and allow populations to move on from the past. Opponents of amnesty respond by arguing that, and I quote, "It is difficult to imagine how a society can liberate itself from a past in which impunity, lawlessness, and abuse of power have prevailed, unless respect for the basic principle of individual criminal responsibility is resurrected." Perhaps the one thing that everyone can agree to in this debate is that reconciliation is not a simple notion. For one example, while it is often assumed that reconciliation is a social process, it is at least as much an individual one between victim and perpetrator. Also, it must be acknowledged that reconciliation and its spiritual partner, forgiveness, often draw on religious notions that are not necessarily universal. Indeed, some question the philosophical appropriateness of forgiveness for horrific and unspeakable human conduct. What is certain is that reconciliation, like friendship, cannot be forced upon people. And some victims will not wish to be reconciled with their persecutors, particularly in the absence of genuine remorse. With forgiveness, there's also the possibility of forgetfulness, in particular of victims. The term amnesty, as is often pointed out, shares a common Latin root, amnestia, with forgetfulness, and the word is amnesia. With this comes the risk of increased denial or the minimization of horrific and international crimes. In part because of the possibility that amnesties will lead to forgetfulness or denial, one of the activities that often accompanies them is the setting up of a truth commission. A truth commission, many of you probably know, is often an alternative to prosecution, especially where the secret nature of many of the offenses makes it difficult, if not impossible, to prove the relevant criminal standard in court. The idea behind many truth commissions is that people will be more willing to tell the truth about their criminal activities if they don't have to stand trial. This can be important, for example, when people who have disappeared and relatives of victims do not know the fate of family members. Truth commissions can also enable more victims to tell their story than is possible in court, where there are procedural and evidentiary rule restrictions. One of the main purposes of truth commissions is to acknowledge the harm that was done to the victims in an official report setting out the violations of rights. The South African Truth and Reconciliation Report named names of alleged perpetrators, while the Argentinian Commission did not have the authority to do so. There can be other possible limitations on truth commissions and their reports. The South African Commission, for example, only had the mandate to deal with political violence. It could not deal with issues such as land dispossessions, forcible transfers, and other aspects of apartheid. Nor could it deal with the use and abuse of the legal and political system in creating and maintaining the apartheid system. As a result, it could only tell part of the story of apartheid. Importantly, as occurred in South Africa as part of the attempt to promote reconciliation and help provide victims with a form of healing, victims were given the opportunity to attend and speak and discuss the revelations made by the perpetrators. Much of the utility of a truth commission depends on the attitude and cooperation of the perpetrators and on whether the engagement they give to the process is full or combative and grudging. Burma. Burma can look to several historical and relevant examples of national reconciliation on its own path. One example, which I've just described, is that of South Africa after the fall of apartheid, when President de Klerk and Nelson Mandela restored human rights for all in South Africa. And with justice for all rendered impossible by the sheer vastness of evil wrought under apartheid, Archbishop Desmond Tutu led the nation toward reconciliation through confession and forgiveness. The civil rights movement in the United States is another example. A long oppressed and exploited minority, led primarily by the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., rendered the self-evident truth of human equality all the more evident through, as Dr. King described it, their, quote, unearned, redemptive suffering. These and other examples demonstrate that reconciliation, in fact, is not a destination, but an evolution. Dr. King famously observed that, quote, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Neither South Africa, nor the United States, nor Burma, nor any nation can arrive at justice. The best we can do is to follow that arc. And as the late Senator Kennedy liked to say, keep our compass true. And so back to the question that begs for an answer. What is the role of the justice system in securing reconciliation? For while struggles and sacrifice have characterized the pursuit of justice throughout human history, that pursuit seeks an end at which justice, if not perfect, is at least accessible, predictable, and fundamentally fair, and at which revenge and violence can no longer be deemed options for settling conflict. Burma's answer to this question will determine the future of its people. For reconciliation's ultimate test, in my view, is obsolescence, meaning that the institutions erected following reconciliation will be able to dispense justice in a way that protects and promotes human rights, and thereby fulfills reconciliation's essential purpose of acknowledging past wrongs and establishing a durable peace. As Aung San Suu Kyi has wisely counseled, quote, "Where there is no justice, there can be no secure peace. And the true measure of the justice of a system is the amount of protection it guarantees to the weakest." As of this month, nearly 170 countries have ratified or acceded to the covenant. Burma is not yet committed to doing so. A proof of Burma's commitment to these principles, as it is for countries that have ratified the covenant, is in the honoring of those principles, not merely in the committing to do so. This new chapter for the people of Burma brings both an historic opportunity and a moral obligation to enact and effectuate Burma's commitment to these principles, and thereby rejoin the international legal community, the International Criminal Court. As Burma rejoins the international community, its commitment should extend, I respectfully suggest, to international criminal justice, specifically to acceding to the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. Just as Tunisia, where the Arab awakening was ignited, did, when one of the first acts of the new government was to ratify the Rome Statute that created the ICC, Burma can send a similarly strong and clear message that it is joining the international community in the fullest sense. The ICC was born of the dual conviction that first, impunity for mass atrocities, the kinds of horrific acts for which reconciliation has been necessary, such as genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, should no longer be possible in the modern world. And that second, by eliminating impunity for perpetrators of atrocities, future atrocities will be deterred. The ICC and the ad hoc special tribunals that have been at work for the last 15 years have an important role in dealing with the complex questions raised by reconciliation in conflict and post-conflict zones. The rapid emergence and development of international criminal law has made the peace versus justice debate one of the most important conversations now occurring in the international community. And the crux of the debate is the level of emphasis and deference to be given to traditional diplomacy versus that given to criminal justice. While diplomacy and justice are not mutually exclusive, we should recall the words again of Dr. King, who said that, quote, "True peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice." Whether through diplomacy or prosecution or both, accountability for mass atrocities must occur. Without it, the real risk is creating a fragile peace that is only temporary and destructible. Today, 121 nations have submitted to the ICC's jurisdiction by ratifying the Rome Statute, which established the court in 1998 and entered into force in 2002. While I urge Burma to join these nations, I regret that the United States has not yet done so, nor has China or Russia. Nevertheless, as the Obama administration is now demonstrating, there is much that the U.S. can do and should do to promote the ICC's vital mandate. And as a former president of the American Bar Association and now chair of the ABA Center for Human Rights, I am pleased to inform you that the legal profession in the United States, led by the ABA through its new ICC project, has undertaken a major initiative to facilitate greater U.S. government engagement and cooperation and support of the ICC. Let me briefly describe what this project is all about. In 1978, the American Bar Association House of Delegates, a 550-member body, adopted the first policy urging the creation of an international criminal tribunal. 20 years later, the ABA was among the key NGOs involved in developing the Rome Statute. Since 1998, the ABA has been calling for the U.S. to accede to the jurisdiction of the ICC, and until that happens, for meaningful U.S. engagement with and support for the court. To that end, 9 months ago, the ABA Center for Human Rights, through its chair, entered into discussions with the leaders of the International Criminal Court. The presidency, the registry, and the office of the prosecutor are the heads of the three organs of the ICC. I led those discussions on behalf of the ABA. I traveled to The Hague, we met in New York, and as I explained to those three leaders of the court, the initiative that we had in mind was intended to address not only the support given by so many in the United States, but the constructive criticisms being made by those same experts in the US and around the world. In early July, I spent several days at The Hague, again with the leaders, discussing the terms of a memorandum of understanding between the court and the ABA on how we might, in the US, judges, prosecutors, lawyers, share best practices and help to train staff, administrative staff, and staff lawyers at The Hague under the auspices of a consortium of the ABA and international partners by judges from both the common law tradition and civil law tradition, prosecutors, victims counsel, during the coming 24 months. And this coming Wednesday, I will fly again to The Hague for discussions regarding the implementation of this project, which is beginning in the middle of October. We believe that the ABA project can foster greater U.S. engagement and cooperation with the ICC in three ways. First, we will promote practitioner engagement and training. The project will marshal the full resources of the 400,000-member ABA and the ABA's team of international partners to help train and share best practices with the court to improve the efficiency of the court and the effectiveness of the court, two of the criticisms that have been leveled at the ICC. We will have legal exchange missions to the U.S. by international lawyers and judges, and to The Hague by U.S. lawyers and judges. Second, the project will facilitate direct engagement among and between U.S. and ICC officials. The project will establish opportunities and venues for ongoing candid dialogue and debate among ICC officials, U.S. policymakers, and stakeholders. The objective of these forums and exchanges is to facilitate public and private meetings, which we hope will lead to greater mutual trust and understanding of what the role of the court is. And third, the ABA, as it does in so many issues of importance, will advocate for the ICC publicly and before U.S. legislative and executive branches. To guide the project's efforts and to maximize its impact, the ABA Center is assembling a bipartisan, Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals, on a board of advisors that already has 14 people. They are eminent U.S. and international experts on international criminal law and leaders of diplomacy and advocacy. The individuals who have agreed to serve to date include some names that will be familiar to you. The Honorable Sandra Day O'Connor, the Honorable Patricia Wald, the Honorable Thomas Bergenthal, the Honorable Philippe Kirsch of Canada, the Honorable Gabrielle Kirk MacDonald, Ambassador David Sheffer, Ambassador Thomas Graham, Ambassador Thomas Siebert, UN Ambassador Hans Corell, Professor David Crane, who was the first prosecutor of the Sierra Leone Special Court, Professor Sharif Bassioni, who was the principal drafter of the Rome Statute, William H. Taft IV, who was the advisor to the State Department, legal advisor to the State Department in the Bush administration. Additional individuals will be invited to serve as advisors. The ICC project will say to those in the United States who may fear or doubt the ICC due to lack of knowledge or other reasons, justice, peace, and reconciliation. Each of us in this room, in our own ways and abilities, is obliged to seek and facilitate reconciliation, justice, and peace, in whichever ways our minds and hearts and opportunities lead us. And this obligation belongs no less to human institutions, including governments, than to the individual human beings who comprise and lead them. Aung San Suu Kyi perhaps said it best in her Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech, which, as you heard, she delivered as a free woman in June of this year, 21 years after she was awarded the prize. She said this: "Absolute peace in our world is an unattainable goal, but it is one towards which we must continue to journey. Our eyes fixed on it as a traveler in a desert fixes his eyes on the one guiding star that will lead him to salvation. Even if we do not achieve perfect peace on earth," she said, "because perfect peace is not of this earth. Common endeavors to gain peace will unite individuals and nations in trust and friendship to help to make our human community safer and kinder." I congratulate Aung San Suu Kyi and President Thein Sein on receiving the inaugural Tran Nhan Tong Reconciliation Prize. I wish them success in the important and difficult work that lies ahead of them on behalf of and in protection of the people of Burma. And I thank you for your kind attention.
He's an impressive guy.
Thank you, Mike. We had talked about the possibility of including a copy of Mike's speech in the certificate and the medal that we'll be giving next week to Aung San Suu Kyi and Thein Sein. And we would like not only to include it, we would be honored to include it. It's a document not only to be heard, but to be studied and to be heeded. Thank you so much, Mike. And I want to thank all of you, too, for coming this evening. We've kept you a little longer than we had thought, anticipated. I've been closer in length to an NFL football game than to a feature film, which is our real goal. But you've been wonderfully patient, and thank you so much.
For about an hour. Where did Nate head off to?
Thank you, Tom. Congratulations. Wonderful evening. Great prize, too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you. And we'll see you.
Tomorrow. Muchas gracias. I took it off and my hope to see you soon. Hushem? Everything good?
I like to wrap it up, like, again, really start to end.
Wrap up. Whatever you're thinking. Enchanté. Que te vaya bien a la escuela.
Ok, merci.
Ok. Au revoir. Twice as long as it I'll see you Monday morning.